we know that you've applied, and so we're thrilled to have you tonight. For some of you, you might have started in September, and some of you might have started a week ago in this process. I know that we have all of the above and somewhere in between. And we know that it's a really long and also stressful process. So I'm glad that the deadline is behind you now. And now we're on a deadline to be reading all of your applications over the next month. And we're pretty excited to do that. So I guess, let's see, we're getting up there. Wow. Okay, 85 people. So the plan for tonight is that I'm just going to introduce Brian here. And then we just want to open it up for all of you guys to ask questions. So in the chat box. So hopefully you have some questions, and I should say that this is being recorded so that we can put it on our website after. And if you could keep yourself on mute, that would be helpful, just so we can all hear. Did you want to say something, Brian?
No.
Okay, you put your hand up.
You keep going.
So yeah, okay. So a few more people coming in, but yeah. So the goal is to answer your questions, and we have about an hour. So, without further ado, I think I'm gonna share my screen and just give you a little introduction here. Okay. Oops. All right. So again, I realize that some people might be jumping on, but my name is Kristen Lathrop, and I'm the Director of Admission at Proctor, and we're so excited to have you here tonight. I see many familiar names, and even if I didn't get to interview you or meet you, I'm familiar with most of your names. I've seen you on the calendar. And we're so appreciative of your time tonight. Many of you have joined our virtual events back in the fall, but some of you we know are new. And so we wanted to do a new, a new topic tonight, which is speaking with our head of school, Brian Thomas. So I just wanted to give a little introduction first before I hand it over to Brian. So I got to get my cursor to work here. So this is our team that you hopefully all met one of us in your time. And throughout this virtual event series, we've tried to allow you to meet other people. And so we're excited to have you meet Brian tonight. And there we go. So there's Brian, head of school. I'm going to let him give his real introduction, but I just wanted to say a few things. So one thing well, Brian's been here 3 years, and there are a few things that I've really appreciated about his time with us. So the first thing is that Brian is not afraid. Sorry, I have gotta get my, sorry. Okay. He's not afraid to step out of his comfort zone, just like we ask students to do here, as well as faculty. And Brian has gone on orientation 3 times. This is how we start our time here at Proctor. You can see Brian in the woods in the one picture, and then him at the end after, when everyone is pumped to be out of the woods and really proud of what they accomplished. So I just really appreciated that Brian jumped into every single thing that we've done here at Proctor, including one of the harder things. And then these are some fun photos where Brian has just been willing and excited to jump into lots of different events on campus. So in purple was an Alzheimer's walk that some students were doing, and they needed a driver, and so Brian jumped in there and went and did that at a nearby town. And then you can see Brian getting some face paint on from a student at one of our big games. I think that might have been Holderness weekend, where the whole school competes against Holderness, and it's really fun, and we won this year. It's the 3rd time in a row. So Brian's got it made. We need more of that. And then, I just want to showcase a few of the other things that happen at school that you might not have seen or heard about, but this is a visiting artist, Robert Haynes, and he's an amazing photographer. But we have these symposiums where or artists receptions, I should say, where they come, and Brian was there and some students. I just wanted to show a bit. And this is a symposium for academics where we have a night where students present different topics in different classes. So I've just really appreciated how Brian's like jumped into everything, and you see him in all different facets of our program. Another thing is Brian's been a strong voice for equity and belonging, which we've really appreciated. And this is a great photo, I think, of Brian when he was helping to lead and our Martin Luther King Jr. celebration day. So I just think that's a nice picture. And then we did a fun event recently. And again, Brian's putting himself out there. He's not necessarily the cold weather person, but embracing the winter here in Andover. We do a really fun event. You can see it's a torchlight parade that students do, and the fireworks. And then we have like music and a bonfire. And so Brian all bundled there. And that was last weekend. And then another thing that I've appreciated from Brian's time, I really like the sign behind Brian, Together, because I think there's been a real focus on community, and we really believe in our community and improving it every day, and supporting one another within our community. So that's a photo of one of our assemblies. But Brian, since he came, has he arrived right after COVID was sort of, well, it was ending. So he said the goal is to be the healthiest school possible, and that's in many different ways. And I've appreciated how we've continued that theme through his time. And we're looking at the whole child and the well-being of students here, and through community, basically, and doing it together. And he can talk a little bit about some of the, structures he's put in place and the supports that he's put in place that I think have really enhanced our community. So I think that's actually my last slide, Brian. So we're hoping that tonight you all have some questions for Brian. And I guess I guess I'll stop sharing because I will watch the chat and I'll help feed some questions to Brian. So we're hoping that you will populate that chat for us. Okay, back to us. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Brian to have him introduce himself, and then we will start watching that chat for your questions and get going. And hopefully I didn't forget anything.
Hello, everybody. This is me. I was going to do a small introduction of myself, which was, if my mother had said when I was in 8th grade, 9th grade, "Hey, you're going to go to this new school. You're going to go to this other school across the country," I would have thought she was maybe nuts because I was okay at my school. Maybe some things not working all that well going from 8th to 9th grade. But when I think about our 8th to 9th graders and what they're able to do and how they integrate into the school, I would have really applauded her in the end. This is my 34th year in schools, and it is really my distinct pleasure of being the head of Proctor at this moment in this time, because there are so many things that we're about, and the number one thing that we're about are kids, your kids. We want to make sure that this is a great process, but that it's also a great fit for your child. We also are thinking a great deal about just the whole child, as you can see, and we're also thinking about how we can make just our work together just much more fantastic. So my mother, who asked me a lot, she's still with us, asked me a lot about how things are going. And I would say, like, if there was one school that I would have loved to have gone to, it would have been the one that I'm at right now, just because it is so, amazing. Being able to stretch yourself out of your comfort zone, being able to go to the woods in the very first week of school and orientation sounds for some people like a dream, for others maybe a little dreadful, others maybe a little bit in the middle. But it does something right away, that it levels the playing field, and almost everything that we do is about leveling the playing field. The thing that I can tell you is that I've got a BA in master's degree in curriculum instruction. So as I float around the school, I see the expertise that my colleagues bring in all of the different facets and areas of what they do. That's very, very impressive. And it's not just credentials, it's really people who have given their lives both in service. There are 3 or 4 people that were the Peace Corps, but in service to kids, in service to your children. You probably saw it if you took a tour, but it is something to behold. And if you haven't been on campus, do come back for accepted student days during that time, because it does make a difference to be able to see the school in action. So I'm going to stop right there and start diving into some questions. So Kristen, what's the first thing you have for us?
Well, no one's written anything in that I can see yet, so
Yeah, but there are
I'm
probably a
waiting.
bunch
But
of
okay,
questions
I'll
to be
feed
had,
you
right?
one, but
Yeah, feed
I
me a
was
bunch of questions.
okay. Well, I like the thread that you were on, thinking
Hmm.
about all these students are about, they're about to endeavor in a new school, right?
Yeah,
And so what would you say? I mean, you were only new 3 years ago. Like,
yeah.
what would you say to these new students stepping into Proctor? How to navigate that transition, who's going to help them? Sort
Well,
of.
there's so many adults. The thing that I can tell you about Proctor is that it's webby. That there's so many adults waiting to catch you, but also really waiting to have you take the lead on your own life. Like we do this really amazing thing of sussing out what a kid's real aspirations, true aspirations are. I mean, you could come in as a soccer player or a skier or hockey player or just an academician and leave as something entirely different. You could leave after being in the theater or music, or maybe it's the arts, or it's math or something. Whatever it is, there's something to stretch you outside of your comfort zone. But we're here to hold you. And the adults in the community, that's how we do it. There's always 1 or 2 or 12 adults in your way. And usually there's 1 or 2 trusted adults that kids have. Sometimes it could be a kid's advisor, or it could be an unofficial mentor or coach that jumps in to help kids really begin to navigate not just Proctor, but the larger world. And we we mean it. It's not something that's a happenstance. It is what we do. So um, people can talk about like, wow, how do you
What?
get so many kids integrated into the community? We integrate kids into the community by saying, this is very important. This part of your being an individual is really important, but it's really about how you integrate into a larger sort of stratosphere.
Thank you. I have one that sort of, well, it's different, but that was a good starting point. So
Yep.
here's a question, Brian. As the new leader just a few years ago,
Yep.
what changes have you made? Oh, yeah, what changes have you made to this point? Because I think you have made a few good ones. And
Well,
it's
the one,
honestly fine.
yeah, it is the thing that you referenced before, which was the very beginning. We talked about how do we become the healthiest school possible, and the whole tagline is this: to become the healthiest school possible, understanding, valuing, and connecting individuals to community with compassion, integrity, and growth. So we really looked around coming out of COVID during that time to say, like, how do we integrate kids who've been like trapped at home for a long, long time on their screens out into the world? Well, there's 2,500 acres to get lost in. There are 3 kids who signed themselves out, and you can do that in the middle of winter to go sleep up at the cabin, which is not heated. And they did that. I think they may have lit the wood stove when they were up there, but that was just one thing that they were able to do. We initiated a dean's team, a grade level dean's team at every level. And there are a lot of schools that have deans at every grade level, but for us, it allowed us not just to do discipline, which is what deans usually do, but we're also saying, like, who are we seeing who's not thriving? Who can really integrate, connect with that particular kid and get them into the wider community. Maybe it's a young woman and she's never played hockey before. There's one kid I know from the Connecticut area, New Haven area, never played hockey before, hadn't been on skates very much, and now scored a goal 2 weeks ago. This kid scored a goal 2 weeks ago and never been on skates. And I said, how did it feel? It said, well, it's the first time it didn't fall down. And it was great being able to do that. So what we're trying to do is to pull kids out of themselves into this world. And we do that by putting in systems like the Dean's Team or going over to the coffee house, which there's always something magical happening over there. We had casino night the other day. We're constantly dreaming up, thinking of new things to do that.
So Brian, you're kind of like you just started talking about this. So there's a question, given the challenges students have with technology
Oh yeah.
and limits, how does the school help them make good choices? Especially in that downtime, in that unstructured time, and maybe what do we do to like have alternatives?
Well, one of the things that a lot of schools have done, and we certainly have discussed this, is just ban technology altogether. We do not like seeing technology, and I will go up and ask kids to put things away, but they're going to have to deal with this in real life or when they're at home. So, and as you know, those devices are, they're meant to be addictive. So we want kids to be able to manage their time. If you walk into a classroom, there's usually sort of I think they're called cell phone condos that kids put their cell phones in when they go in. Oftentimes we will need them to do a poll or something, or our Wellington Engagement Index. So we want kids to use technology in a very good and responsible way. And we also want we want to have activities that mirror things that will pull them out of themselves during their time. I see actually less tech use this year than I have in years past. And maybe because there's so many engaging things within the student activities realm.
Yeah.
Kids going, I don't know, thrifting or to Hannaford's, which is our local grocery store. We're just trying to pull them, or they'll go to breakfast with a friend. They'll go ice skating on Sundays. There's so many things that we put in their way so that they can leave their tech at home.
Yeah. One thing that students told me this year that I hadn't thought about was that because we don't really live in a town, there's not too much here.
What do you mean? Andover's the big city, man.
That they can't like go off. They
Yeah.
basically have to, come up with their own fun, and we help them do that. And so there was another question about like how do we let kids be kids, but there are a lot of activities going on the weekends, and we're trying to find things that they're excited about with the help of student ideas. So I think that actually helps. We're trying to find ways that they want to connect with each other that are fun for them, and it's not technology, right?
Yeah.
So that's part of our weekend goal, and I do think that we've stepped that up this year, and I feel like we're going to continue because it's been really awesome this year.
Did you know that 70% of our kids go away on these programs like European Classroom to Ocean Classroom, Mountain Classroom, and there's very little tech use going on in any. I mean, they can't when they're going across the United States, and some parents they get a little like, oh my God, I've not talked to my child in a matter of weeks if they've gone to summer camp or something, maybe they have. But our kids, when they come back from those places where they've not had any technology for like 65 days, they're usually saying to themselves and other people's like, I don't really need this. I think I can do without this. So we're giving them the opportunity to see how their brains rewire when they're out in the woods for the first 5 days. There's no technology on orientation. So if you're like somebody who cannot live without it, but what we're asking is, how do you manage with it? How do you manage with it knowing that it's designed to be addictive? We give the opportunity for kids to get out into the world without it, and it is a game changer in a lot of ways.
So one last, just there's a quick question, easy question on that. Tech limitations at night. So
Yep,
we do turn off the Wi-Fi at midnight, but
yep.
of course they could have a hotspot or something if they wanted.
Well, yeah, but we also see sort of the traffic
Right.
and also there are dorm parents who go through for kids who aren't, who are, you have to understand that everybody's not everybody is not a boarding student. So it's the same thing. We tell kids to turn things off. And if they're not managing like the next day, if they're sleeping through class,
Right.
we know that.
Yeah.
And kids have to be able to get to bed. We're trying to, it is college prep in that way. We're trying to prepare them for what it's going to be like in college, and certainly being able to self-regulate as opposed to be dysregulated is important.
Yeah. Okay. So
I want to talk a little bit about I'm also looking at the chat right now. I want to
okay,
talk a little
good.
bit about the percentage of international kids. It's around 6-7%, and hovers between 6-7% to, I don't know, 9% at various points in the school history. So that's anywhere from, I don't know, 15 to 30 kids. And those kids are really well supported. There's someone who's tracking them. A lot of kids are pretty independent. So, and a lot of our kids who are coming from either not the Northeast do find friends in the Northeast. So when there are these long weekends that they can go and hang out and be with each other. That is a really cool thing too, is we are trying to knit individuals to community. Yep.
All right. Sorry, I had one and then I'm just scrolling
I've
too.
got one. Can you talk more about the school trips? Yes, Jamie, I can. I think you're probably meaning
Off
the
campus.
trips like abroad are experiential trips. Um, they are designed, 70% of our kids take advantage of that. And the kids who don't and they leave Proctor after not saying, they usually say that is one of the things they wish they had done, that they wish, even if they're a 3-sport athlete or, they do theater or they're just frightened. 70 to 75% of our kids go on some excursion, and usually it's European classroom or Spain, Proctor and Segovia, which is with a host family. In European classroom, you're living actually with the instructors in a chateau in Aix-en-Provence. Ocean classroom, you're sailing down on a tall ship. Now we're partnering with SEA, the Sea Education Association, and they're actually doing real science on that trip. What we're trying to do is to get kids out of themselves, pull them out of themselves, and to do something. We've got kids now, I believe they're maybe in Utah or Arizona on Mountain Classroom, and they're backpacking across the American Southwest. And for those of you who've been on campus or if you've jumped on our website, you'll see it. And just read the blogs too. If you subscribe to our blogs, read those blogs to just understand sort of the ebb and flow of what happens when kids are on trips that aren't a part of the everyday trips. Kids go out all the time at Proctor.
So Brian, on that topic,
Yep.
I like this question from Ben Champeau about like getting kids beyond our bubble here. So one way is those off-campus programs,
Yep.
but I appreciate, what the teachers are doing and the conversations that they're having in classes and how they're connecting the content that they're reading to life like today, right?
Yeah.
And so Brian, I'm wondering or it's also asking like, are there careers that classes we offer can help you find? So I think we have a lot of really awesome classes. So I'm wondering if you can speak to any of that, Brian, about just the class content, getting students outside the bubble, or in other ways, field trips or
Yep.
whatever it is, and then also like career options because they kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah, I just sat in on the culture and conflict class, which is probably, and I just wrote about it too in my last blog. Um, and it is the class was really about sort of race and ethnicity. They're covering a unit on incarceration in the United States. A friend of mine who works at San Quentin, um, who is speaking to the kids too, just about their work there. And I talked a little bit about one of the reasons why I think that, like Black History Month is a little fraught. Like if you try to jam Black history into like this 1 month period, it is it marginalizes people even more, as opposed to saying like, what are the great contributions that people have had, um, you know, African Americans, especially throughout time, or Latinx, or LGBTQ folks who've had. It's really important that we can think beyond that sort of bubble. But I also understand at the same time, growing up, that if you didn't see yourself in a textbook somewhere, that it could be kind of hard. So that's sort of the thing. I wrote like why I don't celebrate. That was the name of the title of the article. Why I don't celebrate Black History Month, sort of.
Mm.
And it really was about Dr. King and coming of age during that time and seeing him after his assassination. So read it if you haven't. Jump on the website. But there's a lot of content that we delve into just in general. And sort of the idea of career, I would say, looking at chemistry, for instance, they will go out and there are these two young women who are doing water samples of all of the lakes in and around the school. And they're looking at not just pH levels, but how healthy those are. And that will connect them to what they do next. They're both seniors. They're both doing complementary work. And they can find a place in somebody's lab wherever they decide to go to next. I think somebody's applied to Northeastern, somebody else has applied to Dartmouth. And wherever they plug into, they will have had the opportunity of being led by their chemistry teachers to do real science. And their science projects were off the chain great.
And then on top of that, I think I appreciate a lot of the engineering and metalwork options that we
Yep,
have. I think that
yep.
a lot of kids are enlightened there. And then the other science classes as well, with other research and botany. And then, I mean, even our English teachers, like all the teachers are so inspiring. I think, the students they latch on. I mean, whether it's through an academic concentration, which is something that students, it's optional, but they can pursue a passion, a project,
Yep.
in this capstone academic concentration. And so they'll link up with a mentor within the community. I think about one of our teachers, John Boughton, who's, passionate about poetry and music. And I think there's just a lot of opportunity for students to um, use the network within the school and create these relationships and find ways that they see themselves going in the future.
Right.
So we do try, I mean, our classes are more experiential. We're trying to connect students to the real world and make it relevant. How could I use this in the future? Why do I need to know this math? Well, you need to know this math because you need to be able, we have finance, right? Like you need to be able to balance your budget. You need to be able to pay your bills. There are a lot of classes where it's like we're trying to make it relevant.
Yeah,
For
and kids find relevancy in it. I mean, for instance, if you are a kid who's maybe struggling, we don't have, we've got these neurodivergent kids in our school. Some kids really, really quick processors, and some kids who've had maybe struggles throughout their school time. And we find toe holes, footholds within the curriculum. Somebody asked really about foundational texts.
Mhm.
And I would say that's, I wouldn't say it's fraught, but there's a way to look back, look at the present moment, and look forward with what we study. And it's not, I'm sort of a sort of English American lit sort of classicist. I don't, I studied Latin in high school, and I really love that stuff. And I also love finding things, presenting a range of options to our kids. So universal design, and really thinking about how the kids will use something. Like if you're reading The Great Gatsby, for instance, you might understand like, wow, that's what the economic situation was back in the day. This is what I'm studying right now. It's not just about work or work-related stuff a little bit later, but how do you find a toehold in the curriculum to superpower kids into their current lives? One kid became an entrepreneur on where was it, Nantucket. He lives on Nantucket during the off season, and we rolled up into this Proctor gathering, and I'm like, wow, who's the chef? And there were like younger people and older people. It's like, well, the chef is that guy over there, and he's a Proctor alum, and he was, I don't know, 22 years old. And it was his business that he had started. He saw a niche for himself, and he was maybe a junior at that point, going into his junior year in college. But he started this business, and we were talking about Gatsby even then. So, and I said, "Is this something that you want to do after college?" He said, "Nope, just a way for him to support himself." But he's definitely interested in business, and that was pretty cool. He saw a niche, he filled it, and he talked about his time at his old school, which was pretty cool. Another question. What do you got?
Yeah, there are a couple questions about serving the community, both
Yep.
like within our own community, but then also the local community or beyond, like community service.
Yeah, we have a relationship with the local elementary school. It's called Andover Elementary and Middle School. And there are reading buddies that a Proctor now alum started, and it is really taken off in a lot of different ways. That's one way, but there's also ways that kids can go into our own forest, do forest sampling. They staked it out into grids to help local forestry students come in at some point to study a forest that has not been studied all that much, which is our own. It's a second growth forest, so that meant 150, 200 years ago it was clear cut. So it's now most of the forest is about 100, 150 years old. That's one way that our kids give back. Kids give back in a variety of ways during senior project time. They'll go work on a farm. There are three boys that went to work on a farm in Michigan. They travel across the country together, and they helped somebody really begin, because it was in spring, to plant their crops and their seeds, because they were really interested in sustainable agriculture. So lots of different ways for our kids to get involved, and a lot of those ways really follows their interest, and
Yeah.
that's what we're looking to do.
I would say through clubs that students start, right? That's one way,
Yeah.
which you mentioned to start clubs. And then we have project period, which is a week in March, which some of those projects are service oriented. And then we have Earth Day, where a lot of the projects that we do and the students get to choose, they're serving the community and helping Mother Earth. And then
Good.
within our own community, I think I mean, you can see the words behind us, like
Yep.
res respect, responsibility behind me, and compassion and honesty. Like, I think we just talk about helping and supporting our community all the time. And like Brian said from the beginning, that we're trying to pull students out of their own selves and realize that there's this whole group of people who are living together and that we want to all help each other function and be well. So I think there's a lot of talk of just about, helping one another out, whether it's in the dish room, because that is one way that we're helping one another daily, but in the dish room or covering. I mean, the teachers do it a lot, like covering for each other if someone's sick or, stepping up on a weekend to take students off to an activity they want to do. So I think it's sort of like, that's what we do here is we're here for one another, and we're trying to instill that in our students as well.
Mhm. So Perry and Teresa have this question there at the end. They talked about how do you connect families to the community, and then what's the communication channels.
Mhm.
A couple of times a week, we are sending out, probably even more, pushing out communications. You can see your kids on the Instagram channels. You can also read the blogs that come in, and some of it is really sort of good parenting advice. This is what I've gotten from parents when they've talked a little bit about Proctor, is that when they if you have boarding kids, when they come home, you get the best of them. You do, they make their beds,
Mhm.
usually they're not loading up all of their laundry because they can't to do that. But in terms of communicating with you, um, the larger communication about the school does come out through these channels, but there are smaller communications too. So official notes are ways that families can get in real time. So if your kid is one of those kids who does not stay on top of things, they're going to get an official note saying, hey, they've missed an assignment or a couple of assignments. And they just want the kid to know about it, but you get a copy of that at that time. If it's maybe a little more serious, you might get a call from their advisor or their dean that says, look, they need to do a little bit more work or more effort. So from my estimation, our kids are being held. And in fact, when kids leave, they would say, man, I really wish I had somebody still keeping track of the work that they did, like they had back at Proctor, that somebody is really noticing that they're not doing what they said that they were going to do. And for those
Mhm.
kids who don't need it, that's cool too. You might get an official note that's a attaboy, attagirl, at a person for them, just to say, we see you and we're doing a good job. And you can see sort of gratitude notes that kids are getting as well when they've stepped up and they've done something a little extra special for the community. So communication works in a lot of ways, and parents can also communicate directly, usually through the advisor, if they want to know a little bit more about what's happening, what's going on at the school. Yep.
Great. So there's been a couple questions about the Learning Skills Center,
Yep.
and I think if we don't cover everything, I'll just say, like, we have the chat and we will respond to you. Um, but I think this is a good question. Can you talk a little bit about the Learning Center and how those
Yeah.
students fit in with the overall school program?
Yeah, I mean, there are three levels of with learning skills, and you'll know that. I won't cover that. But what happens is we're trying to grow kids out of learning skills in some ways. So they come in and maybe they're on a two-on-one with their learning skills teacher. They're usually paired with those kids are paired with another kid, maybe a little bit older, who's got a complementary issue. Maybe it's an audio processing issue, and you've got kids who can see and say, like when I was a freshman, this is how I navigated some of this work. It's work fundamentally with either executive processing or staying on top of their work, or perhaps it really is really trying to organize their school day or really get some of the work done that they're having in class. Somebody talked a little bit about the schedule a little bit too. So you don't have every class typically every day. So kids, I talk to them a lot when I go into that library, a Lovejoy library, and they are trying to stay at least a day or so ahead. And learning skills teachers will help students do that. And when we're talking about kids in our wellness group, usually we're talking about kids who are having trouble managing it, but it's a very small percentage of kids. That's why I was saying the school is really webby, but learning skills is sort of the way to connect those individual kids back to their classes. It's just one more class that they have during the school day. Learning skills independent or learning lab, those are the other two or three learning skills options. But it allows kids to graduate out of there so that they can, once they go to college, they are not afraid to ask for help or support.
Yeah, and I would add too that like there's so many students in our program that, you're asking, like, how do they integrate, or how are they part of the community? I mean, I just I just see it as one big community. And the nice thing is that those students aren't missing out on anything because
Nope.
it's just built into their schedule. So if you're not in learning skills or learning lab, you would have a free block. So that's the one difference. But if you're using your time well, which most students do probably by the time they're older, they might have figured that out, that, you would be doing homework during that time anyway. So it's just a great opportunity to get work done within your school day. So you're not missing any art. You can still do art, music, technology. You can still take all the core courses that we offer. You can still take honors and AP classes. So it's really not any different. It's totally integrated. So hopefully that answers your question, Doug.
I like
And
Mackenzie and George's
yeah, I
question
do
here.
too.
What is it like to break into and try a new sport at Proctor? It's easy. Like for instance, there are a gazillion kids doing mountain bike, or not as kids doing the road biking sort of in the spring, mountain biking's in the fall. And if they don't have a bike, there's a gazillion bikes around. There are a lot of bikes, more bikes this year than I've ever seen. Or hockey, for instance. I talked a little bit about the young woman from Connecticut who was in hockey. This is the really wonderful thing actually too about Proctor. You go to practice, you show up usually in the first day of the season. Usually there's a JV component to almost every sport, team sport, for instance, and you hang out there. And if you love it, then you stay. And if you go like, I might want to do something else, then you do something else. If you don't want to do a sport in that trimester, you might want to try the recording studio, or you might want to be in one of the 4 plays that we do every year, or you might want to join wood. You're not an athletic kid at all. Join the woods team. There are things that you can do, and that's really quintessentially Proctor, like Proctor from the 40s, when we would chop wood and put them in the dorm. None of the dorms anymore are wood fired, but we still have the woods team that will go out to really take care of our 2,500 acres too. So that's what you do. You just jump in.
There are students that have tried a different sport every single term.
Yep.
I know a student who's done that.
Yep.
So you really can explore and try different things if you want. And they all have JV teams, so there's usually beginners on every team and every sport.
I
So
like Logan's question.
yeah,
Sorry to interrupt. I
yeah.
like Logan's question, which is what led you to choose, what led me to choose to come to Proctor? It was like every school I had been at, I tried to make into Proctor. So great learning support, experiential, hands-on, really good academics, that you can sort of pick your choice in terms of where to jump in, dive into academics, whether you're one of those kids who really loves it, firing on all cylinders, or kids who thought that it was a little bit of drudgery. What I loved about it was that it was all predicated on relationships, like deep human connections. That's what drove me here. That's what I love about the school. That's one of the things that is really, really special. That everything is, and people say that at almost every school. It's like, no, it's really the relationships between it's not just the first name basis, and don't let that fool you. For those, somebody said, well, I would never send my kid to Proctor because you call each other by their first name, and I'm like, well, then you really haven't gotten beyond sort of the intentionality of the first name basis at Proctor, which is like we're leveling the playing field for people so that they can see them as humans, really see them like in their darkest struggles, for kids especially. And we don't want there to be any barriers between any barriers that would preclude somebody giving their all to this place. And that's what I loved about it. That's where I came. And that's one of the reasons why so many other people, some of my colleagues have been here for 40 years because of those deep human connections.
Awesome.
Yep.
Um, Brian, we started talking about communication with families, but I'm also thinking about like how parents get involved both near and far in terms of the parent association and then the other opportunities. And I
Yep.
know, you do a lot in that realm. I wonder if you could speak about those opportunities for parents.
Yeah, the Parents Association that's local or even far away, that they're uh, um, they're writing thank you notes, or they're putting on events, they're adopting a team, or they're organizing parents in their area.
Yeah.
You know, there are a couple of parents in Alaska who sometimes get together or talk to each other about what they're doing, or there are different places in and around the areas that you are. Parents in China right now who got together this past early winter to talk with folks. And 70 to 80% of all of the people who come to Proctor is because of, I mean, probably some of you even know this, because of somebody said, man, you've got to try this school. This is an amazing school. It's like one of a kind. The woman who's the head of ASNE, Claire Lahaney, said to me, she's like, I don't know what it is, but the Proctor parents, like they are different. Like they,
Mhm.
first of all, they identify themselves. They're very proud of the school, and they are passionate about it. So, and that's probably the same way. It's word of mouth, but it's word of mouth because kids are supported, and parents are lovely, and parents get involved in really large and small ways. We have opportunities. Either sometimes parents won't send their kids home during bonus weekend. They'll travel here to be with their kids and hang out with each other, to get to know some of the other parents. They'll take kids out. That's the thing, is if you are living far away from Proctor, there's usually some parent who's got their eye on your kid, because your kid has made a connection with somebody in their class or some of the classes around them. And that is not that's not typical. And that's pretty awesome when you're like a junior brand new to the school, have never been here, or PG. Somebody talked about PGs, and somebody has kind of adopted your kid. One of our students, this is sad, really sad, lost his mom on Saturday. She passed away. And there were literally 5 people who reached out to me who said, what can I do for this family? And what can I do for this kid, especially? And one of the things that I've seen is that level of compassion, that word right behind you, is real at Proctor. It's really real, and it's something that we're very proud of. And it is the reason why this is a stat that I don't necessarily share with a whole lot of folks, but and it wasn't COVID, but it's just sort of the draw, luck of the draw, or the bad luck of the draw, was 10% of the freshman class. So there were 80 kids in this year's freshman class lost a parent before they came here. And I surmise it's because of that level of compassion, um, because that's just not typical, right? That's, I mean, statistically, that's an anomaly. And then there are other kids in other classes. I just think that people feel and sense the compassion from the kids, especially, but also from the families, and especially from the faculty and staff here, who um, have jumped in ways that you just don't see at a lot of different schools. Yep.
Um, so I've been saving this one question, and I don't know if we're getting close to the end. We have about 9 more minutes.
I
So
like Peter and Shannon's question too, but I'll get
okay, we'll
back to
do
that
that
one.
one, and then I'll save mine
Okay.
for the last.
What opportunities are there to cultivate spiritual life?
Mm.
Um, there For sort of religious kids, there are ways for them to exercise that. They'll go into town and they'll sort of follow their faith path. Um, for other kids, it is really being out into the woods, going into the woods and being able to connect deeply on these larger questions about who they are, who they are as people, who they are as souls. And it's a way for our kids to know themselves in a much deeper way than just traditional schooling gives you. And if you're really in the midst with a lot of soulful kids, there are kids who went for their senior project into the White Mountains last year and did some solo hikes with each other, almost their own basically vision quest. And there were 3 young women. They happened to be young women, and they were out there, and they were pretty connected to us if we needed them, or if they needed us. They came back, and they're doing really remarkable things with their lives. So there are constantly people who are talking to them about these larger questions and these larger issues. And we're
Um,
non-sectarian school.
Yeah,
So
and
there you
I
go.
would say there are, so like I mentioned earlier, that students start clubs. There's a student who has a Bible study this year and anyone can go. And I think if there's students who are inclined, you can really follow your passions here. And we have affinity groups who support, different groups of kids. And so that comes from the students, wanting and feeling comfortable to be able to follow that and share it with others in this community, or maybe more, they spend their time, they take some time on their own, like Brian said, on a weekend, if they want to go to church or into the woods. So yeah,
Yeah.
thanks.
What was your question that you?
Yeah, so I think one of the last questions is, because I think it's really great for everyone on this call right now, you students and parents you're going to try to figure out what school is the next best school for you. Um, and so the question from Brinley was, beyond campus visits and these sessions, what can applicants do to best learn about the Proctor community and determine if it's the right fit for them? Um, so my answer, I'm going to answer, Brian, then I'll let you
Yeah,
answer.
yeah. You
My
go for it.
answer is that I really do think that campus visits are huge. And
Hmm.
so if you haven't been, I think you should come back. And then if you are accepted, you should come to accepted student days and to whatever schools that you are accepted at, because I think it's just huge to go there and get a feeling, right? Like when you're on these campuses, you're going to feel, do these feel like my people? Is this a place that I feel like I can live? Am I going to be able to connect here? Do I belong? So I would just say that the visits in person are huge. As great as this is, I would encourage that. But I don't know if you have anything to add, Brian.
That's interesting. The whole DEIB stuff, which is diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging.
Yeah.
And there are a couple of things missing, which is acceptance, right? Like really being accepted at a place. So it's maybe DEIBA. And there's also the idea, Zaretta Hammond talks a little bit about this in her book, sort of cultural competency in the brain, really about productive struggle as well, which is sometimes you do, if you have one of those kids who's like, yeah, they're a little counter to everybody else, I think it's important. I think it's important for kids, especially at this age, to push back against the limits of sort of their school or their parents a little bit. And even in class, a little bit of productive struggle where there's a little dissonance that they have. And that's okay here. There are limits. You do bump up against things if you are absent from classes because you don't quite like your teacher, you get points and you might have to show up and do something a little bit later. And it sounds a little regressive and it's not, but you are accountable. You're accountable to other people. Um, my thinking, especially around, um, really belonging at a school, especially if you're accepted at Proctor, really see, because a lot of kids go to school. A lot of kids go to school because they want to continue to do the things that they're doing, right? I'm a hockey player. I want to just continue. That's great. That's awesome. You can do that at Proctor. But what are the things that you can do that can stretch you outside of yourselves? Like our parents had like cleared the path for them just to be themselves, more themselves. But sometimes it's like I made no team. I went to a 4,000 person high school. Like we had four baseball. I love baseball. Four baseball teams, varsity, JV, and two freshman teams. I made none of them. I play baseball now, men's baseball, and been playing for 30 years, more than 30 years. You know what I did? I joined the theater. And you know what happened? It led to a career as a professional actor. Would have never guessed that at all. I mean, not just a passion, but a career. And I think the first thing that I auditioned for, I did not make. But I kept coming back because there was something there for me. That's another one of the reasons why I love Proctor is that not so much that kids join teams and they get cut. because very rarely does that happen, if ever, I think. But what happens is that they are pushed outside of themselves, like from the jump, from the get-go, and they thrive. They find something, something that they didn't even imagine. That's the story that I hear over and over and over again, is a kid has found something, is like, I would have, if you'd have told me about this thing, me being in the forge, working with Corby Leaf, like all these times, I would have never guessed that. So, yep.
Awesome. So there's one more thing I think we could end on is like,
Please.
there's a question about what would we want to improve or change, but like I
Yep.
kind of see it as like an aspirational question. So thank you. So I'm just going to say thank you to everyone for being on here. The hour went by quickly, but yeah, like what do we want to improve on, Brian, in the coming years? What are we thinking about a lot going forward?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I saw that one earlier too. The thing that I would say that I would love to improve on is, I mean, we're in the wilds of New Hampshire, right? I would love to see, in our strategic plan is like, we want our student population to be more reflective of the wider world, and trying to draw kids internationally, students of color, to a place that's so remote is hard. And I would say a sense of belonging and productive struggle could be, if I'm just going to follow my friends, it's a really difficult thing to do. And I have, as a Black man in the middle of New England, have found nothing but sort of wonderful people in my town. I go to JJ's, which is our local country store, gas station, every morning because I love to connect with the police chief, Joe Mahoney, or the owner of that shop, Jen and John Braley. I mean, it's Mayberry. I know, for those of you who don't know that reference, I'm sorry. But it is small town at its best, and people know you, people see you, people get you in that place. So I would love to have people come back to Proctor to see it for the wonderful thing that it is, especially people who are the furthest from resources, right? Who's like, private school, that's not for me. But that's what I would love, for us to be able to do, to embrace those folks, and really see it as their school. So that's it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We can always be better at everything, so
Yeah.
we're constantly trying to improve all aspects. I think we think about wellness a lot and making sure our students are well. So that's an aspiration that I think we'll continue on. But I
Thank you.
just want to thank everyone for being here. It's 8:01, so appreciate it. And if we didn't get to your question in the text or in the chat, I'm going to try to respond. So we have your contact info. So thank you for putting those all in there, and good to
See
see all
everybody.
the faces and
Thank
names.
you.
Have a great night,
Loved
a
it.
great week.
You guys are awesome. Really, really appreciated you.